Hello, Polly Vacher.
Hello, nice to be here.
Thank you very, very much for giving us the chance to come and talk to you.
Oh, it's a great pleasure.
I'm sure a lot of us know about your experiences. You are an amazing human being who does some amazing things for meaningful organisations like the Flying Scholarship for the Disabled. Polly, we both have experience of working in music with your students and my rock stars. How would you describe your music education chapter of your life?
Well, my father, all my family were musicians really. My father was a professional musician and we were all classical musicians. And I did it as, I wasn't as good as my father and my brother. My brother was principal bassoon in the Halley Orchestra, Manchester, so very capable, able musician. I'm not in the same league. I'd practice for hours, he wouldn't practice at all, and he'd get a top job, and I'm like scuttling along underneath. But I'm pretty able at it, and I love teaching, and I love seeing other people enjoy what I love doing. So to me, teaching music was such a gift, to be able to do that and to meet all these young people, and it gave me such a vibrant life, to be with young people and give them a love of music.
Aviation runs in your family. Your husband, your sons, helicopter pilots. Do you recall what experience you had that first got you hooked on wanting to become a pioneering pilot?
Absolutely, because what I did was I did a sponsored skydive to raise money for a charity. It was actually the Church Urban Fund, which was giving money to people in the inner cities who didn't have very much.
Was that in Great Britain?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I just did a sponsored skydive attached to an instructor, and I got totally hooked on that one jump, and I just had to. I was passionate. I had to go and learn to skydive. It was like being a bird in the sky, because you can actually maneuver around the sky, you can fly. And so I learned to skydive, and I've got 245 skydives in my logbook.
Wow.
But nothing would persuade Peter, my husband, who I'm devoted to and have been married to for nearly 42 years now, nothing would persuade him to leap out of a perfectly serviceable aeroplane. And actually, in fact, he was wonderful, because he never stopped me skydiving. But when I gave up, he actually said, I'm really glad. And what we did was, his job took us to Australia in 1994, and we decided to learn to fly together. I think he did it really to take me off skydiving, but I didn't realise that at the time. And we both took our first flying lesson on the same day in 1994.
So you are living in Australia and you trained for your
we did our flying training in
private pilot's licence. Can you remember key moments from your training days?
Well, I can remember the frustration, and I had a job getting to the first solo standard. I just could not land the aeroplane. I wasn't firm enough on the controls, and I remember that awful frustration. And then there was one instructor, a different instructor, and he just said the right thing, which made me click as to what I wasn't doing right. And I went solo that day, and the feeling of first solo, which is the same for anybody who learns to fly, it's one of the very biggest moments. And I have a very good memory about that, because it was at Canberra in Australia, and big airport, two runways, and I took off on runway 30, and I got up into the air, and I thought, the first thing I remember thinking was, I'm in the air and I'm on my own, and I've got to get this aeroplane down, which probably you felt as well. And the controller then says, "Oh, change to runway 35." And I'm thinking,
you planned your circuit.
I planned my circuit and changed the thing. And I thought it was my instructor, thinking she's never going to land on 30, because it wasn't quite so long, massive runway. But to me, it wasn't as long as 35. So I thought my instructor had rung up the control and said, "Well, give her the long runway." But actually, it wasn't that at all. It was the wind had changed, and it changed the runway while I was doing my first solo. So that was scary, but it was all right.
But I remember the first time the wheels left the ground, it was just that magical feeling of wow. It took me 65 hours to complete my training.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many hours?
Yeah, it's probably about the same for me.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I think that's fairly reasonably normal.
Right.
I mean, people who do it in 40 hours, 45 hours is the minimum.
Yeah.
I think they're sort of particularly gifted at it. I mean, I'm not a particularly gifted pilot, but I've sort of learnt.
How did you feel when your examiner told you that you had passed your general flight test?
I just sort of felt, well, I hadn't really done it as well as I wanted to do it, so I was surprised, really.
Really?
But, yeah, because I'd made a lot of mistakes, but obviously they weren't serious mistakes, so, you know, he passed me.
Do you remember who your first passenger was?
Oh, well, my first passenger was my husband.
Right.
And while we were in Australia, we did a lot of flying once we'd got our licenses. We both got our licenses about the same time. And then before we left Australia, because we lived there for 2 years, we hired an aeroplane and we flew ourselves around the circumference of Australia, the whole way around, up the Centre to Ayers Rock and Alice Springs, across the Simpson Desert. We had 80 hours of flying each, so we didn't have a lot of experience. And so we put on a lot of hours doing that, of course. But we were landing on dirt strips and we were sort of landing on islands in the crocodile-infested Gulf of Carpentaria, flying over desert and landing on strips where nobody was. And it was a great experience. And I absolutely think that our flying improved because we were flying every day, on most days. But also it gave me the absolute love of long distance flying. I mean, that's what I wanted to do from then onwards, really. I just thought this is just great.
Did you feel that you'd accomplished something pretty amazing to fly around Australia, and did it instill a lot of confidence in you? Not just as a pilot, but as just...
Yeah, well, did I think it was amazing? Not really. I just thought, well, it's a great thing to do. My flying skills got, you know, the learning curve was very sharp, and I actually got much better pilot as a result. And I loved going to all these different places and seeing them from the air, because you can actually get such a wonderful view. So having flown around Australia, we thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to do the same in America? We had a son at university in America, and so we thought we'd go and hire an aeroplane and fly around the States and Canada. And this is really how it all began, because I was doing my instrument rating in Bristol. This is meant so that I could fly in bad weather.
So until this point, you were all PPL?
Yes.
It was just your PPL privilege?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I just went to do a proper instrument rating, because I didn't want to be held up by weather, really. And so I was doing that in Bristol, and I mentioned to my instructor that we were going to hire an aeroplane and fly around the States and Canada. And she said one sentence which changed everything, and I'm quite sure that we've all probably said something to someone that changes things, and we all experienced that. But she said to me, why are you hiring an aeroplane? You've got a perfectly good one yourself. And that one sentence changed everything. I thought, wow, perhaps I could fly across to America. And so in 1997, I flew solo across the North Atlantic. My husband followed in a jumbo.
Did he?
Yes.
Who got there first?
He got there first. It took me 32 hours to Boston. I mean, I went up via Reykjavik in Iceland and Greenland and crossed to Labrador and then down to...
How many hours had you logged by this point?
I just got my instant rating and I had 500 hours. So.
Okay, so you know, you were comfortable in an aeroplane.
Well,
you weren't...
They always say 400 to 800 hours is the danger point, because you get a little bit confident and sometimes get a bit overconfident. So I was aware of this, and I'd also just done my instant rating. So I was very aware, and I needed my instant rating to get across the North Atlantic, because you will get into bad weather in the North Atlantic, and it just is part of the North Atlantic. That's why it's so challenging.